is pretty disabling, whether it's mental health, MRDD, sometimes it's a physical ailment. Sometimes it's a mom who just left prison and suddenly all of the family that's been keeping her kids have dumped them back on her, and now she's supposed to try to figure out how to maintain an apartment and get everything back into order and so forth. And finally, we have the Cleveland Transition Center, which is actually something pretty new for us because that works with those offenders who leave our prisons who don't have any supervision. In the past, we've only paid for those folks that were under supervision. So this is something that's really very different for us, and we're hoping to see just how that impacts those folks because nearly 50% of the offenders that we release from prison don't have any supervision at all. So it's definitely a voluntary program. All of this adds up to about 200 different programs that we monitor through auditing and watching what we do fiscally and so forth. And in addition to all of this, we have a transitional control program, which is a step down from prison in the last 6 months of their prison term, lets them out into the community and halfway houses where they're carefully monitored, get jobs and get ready to come back. And we also do residential placement. Each of those sections process somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 offenders a year. And I'm going to brag a little bit. We do all of this with 24 staff. So when you think about it, that's quite a feat. Which makes this study all the more important. This was requested originally by former Governor Taft that we do this. Well, requested. It was mandated by former Governor Taft. To look at, if you're putting $125 million into programs, you really need to know if they're working. And it was performed by the University of Cincinnati. The first study looked at our 2 residential programs. The second study looked at our non-residential programs, those Community Corrections Act programs. About 38% of offenders released from prison return there within 2 to 3 years. So one of the best ways to impact public safety is to use more effective means than prison. So this is why we look at these programs. Are they more effective? Prison is expensive. At this point, I think we all know they're dangerously crowded. If community corrections could be proven to be more effective and less costly, isn't this something we want to do? So, in the initial study, in the initial study, we did see that community-based correctional facilities were 3% better at reducing recidivism. Halfway houses were 6% better. CCA programs were 2% better. All of these programs were much better when they worked with higher risk offenders. The reason that these figures aren't higher is because there were programs that quite frankly stunk and made people worse. So then that dictates where we go from here. And remember too, when we looked at these programs, we didn't just look at the recidivism rates. We looked at individual programs, or they looked at individual programs, and looked at them to see what made a program good. If you had particularly good programs, what were the components that made those programs good? So, when we then got the study back, then comes the action. All right. And here was our action. Frankly, we used to count a lot of toilets and do a lot of measuring and look at sunlight coming in and so forth. Did some operational types audits, but basically we didn't audit the things that mattered. And so following the study, we started implementing standards that reflect all of these positive program characteristics. You know, that your program manager be someone who has a degree and has been in the business for a while. Is the program valued in the community? If everybody in the community thinks your program stinks, and they just put people in there reluctantly, then your criminal justice people weren't backing you up as a program when you try to work with the offenders and so forth. They're just basically going, oh yeah, we'll just stick them here for a while. Then in 3 months, get them back. Staff involvement and training, both. Staff involvement in terms of if staff sees something that they really think that the program can make a shift and make a change, are they listened to? Are they valued? Do they have the opportunity for input? Staff training is very important. We put in a standard that staff have to receive training on evidence-based practices, changing offender behavior. Using evidence-based practices in your case management, that entails using that risk and need assessment, taking that risk and need assessment and using it to individualize the case plans. Developing an aftercare plan based upon what you've accomplished throughout the rest of the person's stay in the facility. So when my auditors go in, they look at the case plan and they say, okay, I'm looking at 10 case plans. Am I looking at the same thing for each person? Is everybody going to the same AOD or drug and alcohol program? And then they're going to go to anger management, and then they're going to do this. And regardless of what the risk and need assessment said that they truly needed, and they show up as very low risk, but we're keeping them in the program for 6 months because that's what we do. That's the kind of things that we looked at and looked at changing. Now, is the program using effective programs? Tai Chi is a wonderful time filler. It can actually, be used as something to help a program deliverer build a bond with the people outside, but it is not something that changes offenders' behaviors. Thinking for a change, moral recognition therapy, things like that are the kind of things that actually help to change offenders' behavior. And probably the toughest one of the whole batch, quality assurance. Getting programs to not only implement all of this, but to embrace it, and the upper management, supervisors and so forth, to actually go in and watch what's going on and make sure that these programs are being delivered correctly. It's not just going through a file and saying, oops, all the paper's there, so everything's fine. So, how do programs respond to this? Several programs raced right ahead of us, and before we even had the standards out the door, we're calling on UC and other places and saying, help us, we want to change, we want to do what works, we want to fix these offenders. With programs like that, you just get out of their way. In different programs, we've always done it this way. Why are you trying to make us change it? We've done this since 1970. Of course, 1970 was when they thought nothing worked. So, in this case,